Welcome to the A. Richard Newton Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series. It is our second to last class, and we are thrilled to have Rotten Tomatoes co-founder Patrick Li with us today. We will start at 10 after 5 as usual. So that's interesting. So how old were you when you came back to the California area, Patrick?
I left when I was 5 from LA, and I was in Maryland through high school, and then came back for school at Berkeley. So I was like, what would that be, like 17, something like that?
Yeah, you were at 17 or 18, unless you graduated early.
Yeah, I think it was 17, something. Yeah, 17.
And that's when Maryland still had a really good. The Terrapins were really good. I thought maybe they'd already gone off by then.
You mean in terms of like college
basketball?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My brother went to Maryland, and he was super into college basketball. I didn't really follow it very closely, but then I remember we had at one point we had Jason Kidd. I think he was the same year as me. I'm dating myself, and I think we had the first year when he was a freshman, we got into, was it the final 16 or something? Yeah,
the Sweet 16.
Sweet 16, yeah.
So you don't know, but I went to school in Virginia, so it was like a big deal. Although my husband yesterday said that I was from an older generation. Didn't really go very well for us after that.
I think the Terrapins, I think they had like Steve Francis or something, who was later on I believe it was the Houston Rockets. But I don't follow.
They had Ewing. They had Patrick Ewing.
Oh, really? Oh,
wow. I'm pretty sure. I could be having it wrong, and I'm sure. Here's the good news: if anybody want to put in the chat, if I'm wrong, that's fine too. I don't know if everybody knows who Patrick Ewing is, so that's what I thought it was.
Was it New York Knicks center?
Yeah. So I went to school with Ralph Sampson. If you really want to go about dating yourself, I don't even know if you know who that is, but he was one of the Twin Towers who played at the Houston Rockets. You all don't need to know that.
Oh, okay, yeah. But I think when I started following basketball, it was like Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady.
Oh, you're right. It is Jeremy Smith. You students are so great. Georgetown. You're absolutely right.
Yes, that's right. I actually, for some reason, that I do know that. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's great. So we've got a couple more minutes to go. I will go ahead and put up my screen just in case people don't already know. Welcome to the A. Richard Newton series. We are thrilled to be speaking with Patrick Li this evening, co-founder of so many things, including Rotten Tomatoes, which is past celebrating 2 decades, which is kind of stunning.
Yeah, it's I think it's older than all the folks here in the webinar.
Is anybody older than 20, you guys?
I am, just a little.
It's let's see, because it started in 98, so it's a little bit older.
Oh, there's Jeremy Smith. Oh, there you go. All right, Jeremy, you take the cake right now for being 37. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, Patrick. And so what we'll be monitoring also, the Q&A. Usually we have a fairly active chat, and also we have a fairly active Q&A as you start to go, and people can upvote questions for you as well.
Very cool. Let me turn off my phone.
Where you're sitting in this cool warehouse, is that just a generic screen, or is that actually a picture of something?
It's just a random Zoom background. I'm just in my bedroom, and I've been using this background because I think it looks cool.
Yeah, it looks very New Yorkish somehow.
Yeah.
Are you in the Bay Area? You are, because it's light there.
Yep. I'm very, like in the peninsula area, pretty close to the airport.
Yes, you make it sound very glamorous there.
Yeah, when I came back, I specifically kind of looked for this area because just being practical, like it's like the BART and Caltrain and airport are all around this area. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And so just but although post-COVID, like haven't really used almost any of those things.
Well, I guess now you can, and I guess without a mask, I'm not even sure how things are going. I think we're still using masks in our class. So it's an interesting time that we're living in. And I'm also so thankful that you're joining us, and understand that you can't be there in person. I think that your reasons are for your latest startup. If it's okay to call Stephanie a startup for your baby. So there's Celia, grew up on the peninsula. Hopefully a lot of people did. And I would say there are a lot of startups that grew up on the peninsula as well. With that, I want to welcome everybody to the A. Richard Newton Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series. We have an exciting talk this evening with Rotten Tomatoes co-founder Patrick Li. And just like every week, we have some questions for Patrick that we'll go through. At the end, I will also share a link for you all to provide survey input. And this week, in addition to that link, I have an evaluation link so that you all can give us some feedback on how the course has gone. As well as just a quick overview of who's talked. So without further ado, it is truly my pleasure to introduce Artem. Artem, I say Kachuk for your last name, but I know you can correct me. Artem is fourth year student, and I think he has like perfect attendance for the Newton series. And I'm pleased to have you introducing Patrick. Artem, I'm going to go ahead and spotlight you, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. I am, of course, worried, but I'll try my best to do well. So hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be able to introduce speakers. So thank you, Victoria, for giving us students such an opportunity, first of all. Second, my name is Artem. I'm a fourth year student here. I study CS and applied math, and I'm an international student, and I'm also a transfer student. So pretty non-traditional background, but here we go. So I would like to keep it short, and I think the time that Patrick has with us is just so invaluable that I'm now willing to take a lot of it away. So the short story of why I'm so excited to introduce Patrick is I am currently working on an idea that is based upon the principle that there are just amazing works of art in the world that, as soon as we consume humans, we become better in all sorts of ways, stuff that connects to our souls. And I'm currently iterating on that idea, and I'm trying to find a niche to basically launch. And according to a common startup advice, it's good to look at what people have done in the past in that area. And once I sat down and I Googled, different companies and different efforts in that area, and I guess what I found? I found Rotten Tomatoes, and I was excited, and I realized that this is really something, as well as a website called Last.fm, that I have to pay close attention to and learn in detail about if I want to learn the lessons that they can bring. And once I started scrolling the Richard Newton talk like list, I found Patrick, and I was like, what? Like, seriously? He's coming to speak. I have to step in and get involved. So that's why. And first of all, Patrick is a Cal grad, so go Bears. And you can imagine the whole like hall is like go Bears. He majored in cognitive science, and I didn't really know a lot about him before that opportunity arose to introduce him. But once I pulled up his LinkedIn, I was shocked with the amount of things that he has done, and I'm sure he will talk about some of them, or maybe all of them, if we have time for that. But it's just I'd like to say that it is very impressive, and he has been involved in investing and advising and starting a lot of companies, such as obviously Rotten Tomatoes, Design Reactor, Alive Not Dead, Hobo Labs, and some other initiatives that I'm super excited to hear about, and I'm super excited to hear maybe some lessons that Patrick has to share with us. Obviously, Rotten Tomatoes is the most, I guess, famous and known product, and it got a lot of traction in the media, and people like Steve Jobs mentioning the website during the one of the Apple's events. And the Golden Tomato Award is something that was all the way around like Hollywood stars at a certain point, and maybe still is. And currently Patrick is involved in PKO investments. And this is a syndicate that invests in startups at the intersection of tech plus entertainment. And I really love that initiative because, as Patrick said several minutes ago, media really shapes people's perceptions. And I think that is really important to address and improve. So I think having those, all of those experiences shows that the possibilities are endless and human creativity can take people anywhere they want. So I think it's a huge honor for us to have Patrick today. And so I would like to introduce Patrick Li, and I'm not taking any more time. Thank you so much.
Patrick, you can't hear the roar of the crowd, but they are roaring. Welcome. Not only that, Kyle Yang, I just have to do a shout out to him. Without Kyle, I wouldn't have been introduced to you. And Kyle is a former Newton Series student, a former SOSV Ventures with William Baobin. And I think you all know each other from China.
Yeah, from I think when I was in Taiwan for
Taiwan.
Yeah, when during COVID.
Yeah, fantastic. So I just want everybody to know you can still go. He's joined us from, I think he's at Columbia now. Kyle, I think you'll probably let us know if that's right or not. But in the meantime, I am so excited that you're with us, Patrick, and not only because you're you, but also because you're a Cal grad. There are so many things on this timeline, but before, which I'm sharing, but before I even start, let me ask you what we ask all of our Cal grads. What dorm were you in first year?
I was Unit 3 Priestley Hall.
Priestley, I think you might be our first Unit 3. I'm sure
really?
People keep me honest on that. That's fantastic. Did you, I'm just curious, were any of your co-founders in Unit 3?
Let me think. Yeah, Sen was down the hall from me. I did a couple different startups, and another friend was also down the hall from me as well. And so, so same floor, everything. Yeah.
I think you mentioned at one point that most of your startups you did with people you met freshman year.
Yeah, I've done 6 startups. Every single one had at least one co-founder who, I knew from freshman year of college.
So all you freshmen, all you sophomores, juniors, and seniors, make sure you're nice too and remember your freshman friends.
Yeah.
Patrick, there is a lot on this chart. You are a serial entrepreneur. I'm excited about you telling us about your journey, but also about PKO investments, which you're also doing with some Cal grads. Can you take us a little bit through this chart and tell us what it was like when you arrived as maybe a cog science major at UC Berkeley late last century? Not to make you feel old.
Yeah, so I actually went to Berkeley, started in '92, to kind of give you some context. So it took me actually 12 years to graduate. And what happened was basically, I started EECS, realized I wasn't crazy about some of the, like the physics and all that kind of stuff. And so then I switched to computer science. And then I wasn't crazy about like the super late night kind of projects, maybe because I waited too long to work on them sometimes. And so I switched to business, and then my parents were like, hey, that's a major about nothing. And they wanted me to go back into something more hard. And then eventually I kind of compromised on cognitive science. My dad had done some research in AI and stuff. And since cog sci kind of touches AI and stuff like that, I think they thought that was a good kind of middle ground. And it also happened to like most of the classes I had been taking up to that point kind of worked for CogSci. So like I didn't really waste any time, I guess, on things that didn't count towards the major, I guess. I took that long because I did 2 years, and after 2 years, I kind of got impatient. I convinced 3 friends to leave school with me to try and do a startup. Our first startup was selling computer systems and components, so nothing really fancy. And we were literally running out of our apartment. People would, you know, place orders with us through email. I think we had a very simple website up, and we would go out and we got like reseller licenses, and we would go out and we'd buy the parts, you know, down in South Bay, drive back up, and either sell the parts directly or build a computer and then sell a computer. We actually ended up selling 2 computer labs worth of equipment, like 60 computers, to the mechanical engineering department. I think it was like Etcheverry. Yeah, that was a challenge, because to build 60 computers, I think we did them in batches of 15 to deliver at a time. But even then, you had to have like almost like a mini assembly line to kind of do that. And yeah, and basically it took me 10 years to finish the last 2 years worth of classes. And I was mostly doing summer classes or part-time, like coming in and taking like 2 classes instead of 4 or 5. And yeah, so it took me a while. And meanwhile, I was doing that. And then I did a second company, which was like doing web design for the entertainment industry, and then Rotten Tomatoes. And then it was pretty much when we sold Rotten Tomatoes, I was able to go back, finish off my last, you know, semester's worth of classes, and then graduate.
It's so interesting for you to talk about that. But so the computer company where you sold those 2 labs worth to McKee was called Human Ingenuity, right?
Yep.
And the other company was Design Reactor.
Yep.
I find the names of your companies interesting, and maybe it's because I'm also a little bit of a marketing person. Can you talk about the names, how you all came up with the names?
I think we just sat around a room. Rotten Tomatoes was actually my co-founder, so he came up, Sen, he came up with the idea himself. But Human Ingenuity, I think we just sat around and came up, like tried different names, and I think we thought that one sounded cool. And I believe at the time we even got like humans.com or something as the URL. Back when there's, you know, more names were easily available. And then Design Reactor, I think same thing. We just kind of sat around and we were just trying to come up with names that we thought were interesting. I think that was available. And we had a friend who came up with a pretty cool, like almost like a nuclear reactor looking kind of thing. And yeah, and we just kind of stuck with it. I want to say most of the time when we came up with names, it's something like that. Just sit around a room, see what's available, find something you think is cool.
So like that's the easy part. How do you convince people who are serious enough to get into UC Berkeley to actually leave UC Berkeley? How did those conversations go?
Yeah, I think it's stuff like this happened a couple of times. I would say back then, I would say my superpower at the time was if I believed very strongly in something, I was pretty good at convincing people to quit school or quit their jobs or move to another country or other things.
Did you ever talk to the parents? And do they still talk to you?
I did not. I think, yeah, I think generally, I'm trying to think if I had to. No, I think generally it was, I just convinced them, and that was good enough. Yeah.
Were you always in the CEO type of role in those companies?
The first 3, yes. When I went to my 4th one was in China. That one I was more supporting because I wasn't native there. Mm-hmm. 5th one, yes. And the last one, I was functionally like the main person running it, but I was not the CEO in that situation. I was just a co-founder because it was with one of my friends who was from also freshman year of college. I did my first company and my last company with him. And in that case, he was the one who had much better investor connections at the time. And one of his main investors for his previous company was the main investor for that last company. And so I think it made more sense to make him the CEO because it was also easier to fundraise.
You talk about your superpower, and it's something that I talk to professionals about, but I'm not sure that students talk about that much using those words. How did you find your superpower or perfect it?
It was something that I think even when I was in high school, I started realizing I had, where I would, be able to pull things together. I remember I helped start a Chinese club in my high school. I was like the co-president of it. We ended up doing a couple of events even that was like cross schools of a couple hundred students. And even among my friends, I was like in a magnet school in Maryland. But then I would have a closer core of friends of maybe 20 some folks. And I was kind of like a leader of the nerd group or whatever. And then when I was in college, freshman year, I was also very active in the UC martial arts program. This Chinese martial arts called Wushu, which is like the stuff that Jet Li used to do. And even there, I was became like an assistant coach and all that kind of stuff. It's just something that I guess naturally just happened. And so I don't even think I realized it until later that I had something like that. But it's just if I believed in something very strongly, especially back then, I was just very good at convincing people.
Would you talk a little bit, since Rotten Tomatoes is, past its 20-year anniversary, and for some reason I think it might have something to name with Jet Li. I could be totally wrong, but can you talk about like what happened? I mean, I think you had Design Reactor, and then on the side you're kind of doing this other website. It'd be great if you could talk a little bit about that. And I'm actually going to show some pictures that you provided. Got lots of pictures, everyone, by the way, of some of the websites over the years.
Right. So I can talk about Jet Li and I can talk about Rotten Tomatoes. I'll do Jet Li really quickly. A lot of us were obviously big fans of his back then, in the 90s and early 2000s. He was, quite big, probably one of the top like action stars, I guess. And he had a movie called Lethal Weapon 4, where he was the main bad guy. And so he was in the States promoting that. I think he was at a comic convention in LA. So my friend and I, who were both really big fans of his, we went down and we actually drove down to LA to go there and see him. And we knew, because we were into martial arts and stuff, we knew some folks who did know him personally. And we ran into them the day before and told them about where we were going. They came along. And so when we were able to go backstage, meet him quickly, then later on him and his assistant had to go up to sign autographs and do all that kind of stuff. Then I was standing in the back with his publicist was there. And while I was standing back there, this is when we were doing our design firm. I'm like, oh, does he have a website? And she's like, oh, no. And I was like, hey, if you're interested, maybe you can give me your info and then we can, see if there's anything that we can support on. And so she did. And then we basically came back, and a lot of the folks in our company, we had like 20 something people, were actually from the Wushu Club. We recruited a bunch of friends essentially. And so we all got back together and we came up with a bunch of comps for jetli.com essentially, and sent it over, presented it. Then they really liked it. And we met with the publicist and the assistant and ended up doing the official site. And we didn't charge anything because we were, huge fans, but then he actually helped get us in with Artisan Entertainment because he had a movie from Hong Kong that got brought over. And so they saw the website, they were interested, and he put us in touch with them, and we ended up doing a couple projects for them. He also put us in touch with Warner Brothers because he had a movie called Romeo Must Die with Aaliyah. And he actually got us in to do the official site for that. So so it was actually quite good for us, even, and plus it was also good to put on our portfolio. So that's
ding, ding, ding. This is how you make the most of a connection.
Yeah. And I have I'll jump in, a similar story with Disney. Disney was our first entertainment client. Up until that point, we were only doing like doctor websites, dentist websites, and like motherboard manufacturers, and kind of like boring websites that we weren't really that interested in. But we did one for a company called Tom's Hardware, and the president of that, his daughter was working at Disney, Disney Channel, and so he was like, come to, I think it was Comdex in Vegas. He'll make a bunch of intros to other companies that we could potentially do websites for. And we're like, yeah, that sounds great. And while we were there, his daughter was also there, so he introduced her and for a meeting. And then she was like, hey, send us your portfolio. We just fired our lead developer. And it's basically because someone, like a disgruntled engineer in that design firm, I think put a curse word in somehow that made it through 3 levels of QA and went live. And basically, they're instantly fired. You can't do that with Disney.
Not with
Right.
Disney. Nope.
And so the problem was, at the time, our portfolio had nothing entertainment related, like nothing that would make sense for Disney. And so what we did was, when we got back, I grabbed a bunch of the people in our company, but at the time we were just starting out. So I actually went and asked a whole bunch of friends who I knew could either code or could do art, who didn't work for us, if they could come in and help us over the weekend. And so over that weekend, we basically we got maybe a dozen people to come in and help. Probably only less than half of them actually worked for us at the time. And we looked at Disney Channel's upcoming schedule to find a movie that they didn't have a website for that was coming up relatively soon. And we found it was a Mighty Ducks 2. Mighty Ducks is like a ice hockey movie. And so we actually rented the movie from Blockbuster, which was still around at the time, watched it, did like a pizza party for everyone. Then we basically broke everyone into like small, assigned things to everyone to work on to build the web page. We had bios, we had icons and photos of the cast and crew. We actually made 2 Flash games that like worked. One, I can't remember what one of them was, but one was ice hockey. Is basically Pong, and we did it all in one weekend. And so then after that weekend, I wrote to the daughter, Kara, and I was like, hey, there's nothing in our portfolio that makes sense for what you're doing, but we made this to show you what we can do. And she was blown away, because she's like, there's no way we could have even known to have done this in advance or anything like that. And so
I don't even think people had hackathons then. I mean, it was like the first hackathon.
Yeah, it's kind of like a hackathon. And we basically did that one weekend. They ended up not using the website because we didn't do it to like Disney standards, but they were like, we're really interested in those 2 games. And at the time we were charging $500, $1,000 for a website. They bought the 2 games together for $12,500, which to us was like way, way more than anything we could imagine. And then from there, we had to clean it up for them and stuff, to match their style guide. They sent over a style guide that was like this, huge booklet with tons of stuff, like all these rules about what you can and can't do for Disney. And but then they ended up giving us more and more proposals, RFPs, requests for proposals, that we kept doing. We kept getting more and more and more of them, to the point where eventually we became their, I think, lead developer for a few years. And
Wow.
they were giving us like $1 million in business a year.
That's incredible. Was Rotten Tomatoes as a site already up, or right before? I mean,
Rotten Tomatoes kind of came a little bit out of that. So now I'm going to Rotten Tomatoes. Our creative director,
I'm going to pull up the site just so we can see that from 2000 at least.
Yep, sure. So our creative director, Sen, he was a big movie buff, and he came up with this idea on the side. Part of it was inspired by actually our work with Disney Channel. There's a show at the time called Movie Surfers. And so he was one of the people working on the Movie Surfers site, and it gave him some ideas. I think because, if I remember the story right, he actually came up with a comp of Movie Surfers that looked a little bit like this. And they rejected that version, but then he still liked that idea. And then much later, when he decided to do this in late 1998, his idea was because he was inspired by, he was a huge Jackie Chan fan, and Jackie Chan had a movie coming out in the States called Rush Hour, which was like Jackie's first really big, true Hollywood movie. And so Sen wanted to know what everyone was saying about the movie. So he went out, and back then, most of the reviews were not online. They were actually still in print. So he went to the library and pulled out like magazines and newspapers to read the review, write down the quote, if it was good or not. And then he went back home and he started working on the site. And basically in 2 weeks, he was able to build the site. He was not a coder, so he did everything in static HTML. And the idea for the look was inspired by, basically, if you look at movie posters, they would have a poster with, they would run in the newspapers, a full page ad that looked like a movie poster with quotes on it. I think they still do that sometimes these days. And except the quotes would always be good, even if the movie was bad. And so his idea was like, what if I put quotes only from professional critics, good and bad, and then give you a score that represents the percentage of the critics that recommend seeing the movie. And so that's kind of how the idea was born. And the reason why he wanted to use only professional critics was in the cases where the movies were bad, they would put good quotes in, but they wouldn't be from real critics. They would be from like a radio station DJ or something like that. And so that's kind of his thinking. And then he put it out. We were hosting it for him, and it just started getting more and more traffic, more and more like press. And essentially after a year, we're like, maybe this should be the business. And essentially I approached him. I said, why don't we kind of merge what we can do together? Because at the time he was still kind of doing it on the side. He brought in a couple of friends to help him. And but he didn't have any tech resources. It was still static HTML. He had no funding. He didn't have really contacts to the studios or anything. We brought all those things to it. And so we kind of merged. And so we kind of became co-founders. Myself and Steven, who was our CTO, and him became co-founders of both our design firm and Rotten Tomatoes. And then we spun our design firm off to another group to take over, so we could focus just on Rotten Tomatoes.
And that design firm was acquired by somebody too. And so what's interesting to me, I'm not sure what the first Rotten Tomatoes site looked like. And so this one is up, but
They look very close to this.
What I found interesting also is if you go through the years, I mean, sites change all the time now. Excuse me, now I've got like, but what's fascinating about this is that it's just not that different from year to year. You were kind enough to share this, which speaks to the strength of the site.
Yeah, so this 2001 to 2004, 2001 is when we did a big refresh. So if you compare 2000 to 2001, that's pretty different. And that's when we had another person come in, one of our other creative directors, who kind of tried to help make it a little bit cleaner. Because the original version, it was very much more like artistic. If you look at like the way the tomatoes were and all that kind of stuff. And so we simplified it so like the splats and the tomatoes were a little bit more clean. And this is when we were still running the company up to 2004. That's why the look was very consistent. And then if you go a little bit further, you can see that every owner afterwards kind of did their own pass on it. So I don't know if you have that on another slide.
I do. I was like, something happened in 2004 that I thought was kind of interesting too. So let's see if I can find that. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically in 2004, that's when we sold it, but we created the Certified Fresh. It was actually our salesperson that we brought in. He was actually really good about talking to the studios, getting more feedback. And one thing that was created was Certified Fresh. The idea being that typically before then, we only had Fresh and Rotten. Fresh was 60% or above, Rotten was under 60%. With Certified Fresh, that was 75% or above, meaning 3 out of 4 critics recommended seeing the movie. And the reason why was because studios were like, hey, when they have a fresh movie, they kind of want to tell the world about it. And they were like, and so we kind of worked with them, and they, especially if they had one that was very highly rated, they really wanted to tell the world about it. And so we worked with them, we came up with this idea, we thought it made sense, put it out there. And the thing that was really cool about it was when it happened, they would end up putting it and promoting it on posters. So like Eternal Sunshine was the first one that actually had the logo. If you look in the bottom right above the little picture of Jim Carrey, that's the Certified Fresh logo. And
I think I'm looking right. Yeah.
And so they put it into the posters, they put it into the DVD covers. They would put it into the trailers, movie trailers. They would buy ads, not just on Rotten Tomatoes, but everywhere. Like I literally have seen, I think it was the Super Bowl or some, you know, huge thing where it was, I think it was Mission Impossible. And literally like in the middle of the trailer, they're like, and it was a 90-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, you know, and I've seen that multiple times. So that was extremely cool for us because it helped us with traffic, it helps us with branding, it helped us with revenue. And it made a lot of sense for us. So that was
So
one thing. Yeah.
the best marketing is when others are talking about what you're doing. Do you mind if I play this video real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is Mark Ruffalo and Jon Stewart, who was Comedy Central, like king of Comedy Central. Let me see if I can play this.
Now this movie is actually getting great reviews. It's on you ever go on
I'm going to pause this. Can you all hear it? I'm looking for like Rishi, or can you all hear when it's playing?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
No. Rotten Tomatoes is like it's like a website that reviews movies before they I guess before they come out. Or
Did we get any
you got very good reviews. You got full tomatoes, which is good.
like not rotten ones?
No, if you get a tomato, that means that a certain percentage of people say it's good. I think it's over like 70% say it's good. And if not, you get, I'm not even sure why they do this, an asterisk, which makes no sense in terms of a tomato. So if your movie is bad, there's an asterisk next to it. And if it's good, a delicious tomato.
And we got a delicious
A
tomato.
delicious tomato. So congratulations. Very excited. Eternal Sunshine also got a tomato.
It did.
Yeah.
That's it's good.
Yentl, asterisk.
I'll just leave that on that. We know it's not an asterisk, it's a splat, right?
Right. Yeah, that was super cool because a quick story about that was we had no idea that Jon Stewart was going to do that. And this is, I think we were already at the point when we were selling or sold the company right around this time period. And I was, one of our editors was living with me in an apartment, and he happened to watch The Daily Show like every day. I normally don't watch it. And I just happened to be microwaving my dinner. And so I was just kind of standing there waiting for the food to warm up. And Jon Stewart starts talking about Rotten Tomatoes right there in front of us. It's like one of the few times that that's happened. And we were just freaking out. We were like, oh my God. And we were like trying to grab our cell phones and, you know, calling friends to like turn on Rotten Tomatoes. And at the time, it felt like it went on forever because I think, you know, it felt like time slowed down right during that time. And it was, yeah, that was super cool. I think that's still probably one of the most cool things that have ever happened to us, you know, in regards to Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And so it's fascinating. I'm feeling like, let's see, you had the first hackathon. Then there was another first that I just heard. Just, you know, this rating system is kind of incredible, and just all sorts of things. When in 2004, you said that's around the time that you were acquired. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
actually, I have a question before that. I apologize. Nothing
No
like interviewing interrupting your own self. When you were doing Rotten Tomatoes, what was the business model? This is Rishi's question.
Sure. So with Rotten Tomatoes, we made revenue in 3 ways. Advertising, and that was like 50% of revenue that came from like banner ads, you know, some of these like higher quality, you know, flash ads, things like that. We had sponsorship in the, what do you call it? In the newsletter, the weekly newsletter. We also, at the time, had like recommended critic that was like New York Times, they actually paid to, feature critic, because they realized that we were actually sending a lot of traffic to their movie critic. And so they actually paid to have their critic show up higher. The critic had no effect on the score. Like their effect was the same as anyone else, but it was just featured higher. And so all that generated about 50% of revenue. 30% came from affiliate sales. So that was sales of like posters, celebrity images, DVDs, movie memorabilia, movie tickets, things like that. And then 20% actually came from licensing. So folks like, I think it was like Comcast, Netflix, other folks that were paying to have some of the data that we were gathering, whether it was like review data, scores, other things like that. And so, yeah, that was how we broke down our traffic or our revenue.
So that's kind of standard operating procedure now. It was not then. And by the way, Google wasn't out even then.
Right. We were pre-Google AdWords. I
Yeah.
think they started right as we were towards the end of right before we sold. So they did show up towards the end, but prior to that, it was like direct ad sales. We worked with ad networks that would help, sell stuff for you. Google AdWords, I think, made it much, much easier for people to start out. Because before it would be like, unless you had, 10 million page views a month, you pretty much aren't going to be able to get any advertising.
And when you came out, I guess I want to remind everybody, like in 2000, when you all spun off, it was a bad time. I mean, everything was imploding on the internet. People were like, meh, internet, not so interesting. You all came out during that time and just kept churning.
Right. So in August 1998 is when Sen created it. Towards the end of 99 is when we're like, hey, maybe we should run this as a business. Decided to merge. I went out, raised $1 million in funding in like January and then of 2000. And then I think it was March of 2000 is when the internet stock bubble burst. Everything crashed. And the problem with that was twofold. One, you're not raising any more money after the stock bubble burst. But number two, at the time, almost every, got to be like 90-something% of all the internet startups were reliant on advertising revenue as their primary and only form of revenue. And that revenue was coming from other internet sites. They were basically buying traffic from each other. All that money was just moving around in a circle. And once that money dried up, they had no revenue and they couldn't raise funding. So I want to say it felt like 90-something%, maybe 95% of every internet company just died during that time. And a lot of the ones that survived were either like us, like we were super just bootstrappy, or they're folks like Amazon that sold directly to people, or eBay. They're generating revenue from users. And those ones were much, much more healthy in that environment. And for us, once we raised, we had like 25 people that we brought over from our design firm. And after the market crashed,
this movie's actually
Sorry.
we were spending like, I think our burn rate was like 100,000 a month. And we were like, we're not even going to make it through a year at this rate. So we had to cut. We ended up going from 25 to 21 to 17 to 14 to 11 to 7 in a year. We made it. We basically told a couple people were like, please, if you can stay, that'd be great. And then we just told everyone what was going on and we had to reduce. And so we essentially try to keep people like working on the design side. But we told them that they should also start looking so that they didn't have a gap. They could work with us until they had another job. And they moved to places like, Pixar and ILM and Fox and Apple and stuff. So they most of them did quite, well, even when they transitioned. But yeah, we had.
So I'm like, as you're talking, I'm sharing these photos of kind of the starting team way on the left, and then building, and then a larger team.
Yeah, and so if you look on the left, that was kind of after, I believe. No, I think it wasn't. We hadn't cut yet, but basically when we did cut, we ended up at 7, and it included the 5 of us. So that's I'm in the yellow. Sen's with the glasses, or someone else.
Yeah, I think the way I have it, Paul is way on the left, then
Yeah.
you, then Lily, then Sen, and then Stephen. Is that right?
Right. And Stephen was our CTO. Sen was the creator of Rotten Tomatoes. Lily was our CFO. Paul was like business and marketing. And we also had 2 other folks, our editors, Bin and Susan. And so it was the 7 of us. And even with the 7 of us, myself and Paul went to 0. The other 5 took a 30% pay cut. So basically the 7 of us were essentially running at like half the cost. And that was the only way we could kind of keep the lights on. And for me, when I went to 0, I actually ended up for about half a year just living in the office. We had a nice, very nice space that we had a 5-year lease on that would not let us out of the lease. And, our space was designed for 30-something people. And so once we let go of so many people, I ended up taking 3 cubes that were like in an L shape and taking them all over. And that became like my mini apartment. And I would just hide my clothes and everything in the drawers. So if you close all the drawers, it just looks like a normal space. And it, but then I could live there. And luckily downstairs, there was a gym that, you could also shower in and stuff.
So speaking of clothing, I have this interesting picture here. I was wondering if you could talk about it. I believe you're dressed as Mario. Is that you?
No, that's
Oh, where are you?
that's James. I'm just the guy with the really big eyebrows from a cartoon anime called Naruto, and I'm in the green on the right.
Yeah, Patrick, I don't even recognize you. Those eyebrows are big.
Yeah, they're just some fake eyebrows I put on. Yeah, that was one of we did Rotten Tomatoes like Halloween parties, just for fun, and I think one of the last ones we did when I was still there, Rotten Tomatoes had gotten pretty big, and we actually ended up putting it on the site like, hey, we're doing a Halloween party. We had people driving up from like LA and other places. We had so many people end up showing up that there was like a 2-hour line to get in, and it was actually a bit of a mess. And we had like some people writing really angry notes to us, and then we decided not to do any more public type events for Rotten Tomatoes.
Well, then you had some private events. I thought this was kind of interesting. It seemed like some people married each other.
Yeah, so Susan, she's the one that's next to me in white. Yeah, she was our editor, one of our editors. She ended up marrying my younger brother, so now she's my sister-in-law. And then Bin, he was he was editor-in-chief. His cousin ended up marrying Sen, so they're like cousin-in-laws. So we had always said that we were like a family, and we actually kind of became an actual family.
Is this at one of the weddings? Here, on the
Yeah,
right?
that's Eric's wedding, and he was he was there when we were like 20 something people. He actually worked at SRI, which is Adam Chayer's company.
Yeah, at Siri.
But he was one of our engineers, and that was his wedding. Yeah.
Wonderful. There's so much interesting information, and now I'll go back to that question I asked before. You sold 2004. What happened?
Yeah, so we had gotten offers far earlier from like iFilm, which was kind of like YouTube before YouTube. They were one of the first like content streaming video companies. We had gotten an offer from eUniverse, which was the company that helped make MySpace. And I think it was like, I think iFilm was like 10 cents on a dollar. We were like, no. eUniverse was like 25 cents on a dollar, but for stock. Some of our investors were like, take it, because everything they invested in at that time went to zero. But the issue was, one, we didn't want to sell where our investors would lose money. And two, eUniverse, I think at the time, they were public. And for some reason, there was some, I don't know if it was accounting irregularities or whatever, their stock was actually frozen. And we're like, oh, that's really disturbing. So we obviously passed on it. And then later on, we had IGN Entertainment, which was a gaming site, made an offer. We were like, we're not interested right now. Then I can't remember how much longer, maybe a year afterwards, they came up with a better offer. I think we were saying, we don't want to sell unless we can make our investors their money back. At the time, we had raised at a 5 million pre, we raised 1 million, so we were 6 million post money. And so we weren't going to sell for anything less than 6. I mean, and these numbers are, much smaller than what you're hearing these days.
For someone who didn't go to business school, you're very numbers focused. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And and so then they eventually made an offer that was above that, and then they even upped it a little bit more to make it a no shop. And so we decided to take.
What is that? Can you explain what that means?
Oh yeah,
the
a no shop agreement was basically an agreement for us not to go and shop around our offer, which in retrospect was maybe not a smart move on our end. We didn't know what we were doing as far as selling. As entrepreneurs, everything we did was learning from mistakes. Looking back, our mistake there was you only get like one chance to sell your company, really. So that's not something that you can do by trial and error. And what we should have done was go out and talk to people who had more experience around that to get more advice on should we sell, how to sell, all that kind of stuff. I think we didn't know what we were doing, and IGN really did. And I think we did not really do a great job with the sale. Yeah.
So it's interesting that you talk about you would have talked with a lot of different people, because if you fast forward now, you actually have a company with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of serial entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So right now I ended up doing 6 startups. The 3 I did after Rotten Tomatoes all unfortunately didn't work. Very quickly, it was in China was one. It was kind of like Yelp. Then I was doing a social network in Hong Kong that was kind of like a MySpace connecting celebrities and artists. And that one we had like the official Jet Li site, official Jackie Chan site, all these things, but it unfortunately, we did sell it and got our investors their money back, but it really didn't, I wouldn't say it really worked. We were competing with with all the social networks and everything in the China and in the US. And we were just not well-funded enough and didn't have enough resources. And I think we were trying to do too much. Then our last company was making a mobile game, a synchronous multiplayer role-playing game. So we were trying to do this before they had like Fortnite and all these games on mobile that were synchronous multiplayer. We were trying to do, we were like, we think that's the direction everything's going. Raised, I think, almost 5 million on it. But unfortunately, we got the game out, but you know, the economics didn't work. We couldn't make enough per user versus.
So is that the Hobo one?
Yeah, Hobo Labs. Yeah, we couldn't make enough per user versus what it costs to acquire a user. And so, yeah, and then after that, I was kind of burned out, ended up just taking a break for a few years, mentoring a lot of like accelerators, you know, helping out with Skydeck, you know, Blue Startups in Hawaii, a number of other ones, speaking at tech conferences and just taking a break. And then a year ago, essentially, a few other, I was running a group for tech founders, notable tech founders, like 100-some people. Now it's like over 10 years old. And two of the founders from the group, who actually both are also Cal alums, approached me with an idea of, hey, maybe we can create syndicates for our members to invest into each other's companies. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool. We ran some tests around it and decided to do that. And one of them, we actually have now 3 partners besides myself. One of them is Holly Liu. She was the co-founder of Kabam, the mobile gaming startup.
Kevin Chu's cousin.
Yeah, Kevin Chu's cousin. And she's a 4-time visiting partner at Y Combinator. We have Kun Gao, he was the co-founder and founding CEO of Crunchyroll, the anime streaming service. And then also Kevin Lin, who's co-founder of Twitch. And essentially now we are investing at the intersection of tech and entertainment. And in we started a year ago in March, and we've now invested into like 40 companies, raised 31 million for those companies across 400 investors who are all like value add folks at the intersection of either tech or venture or entertainment.
That's incredible. What is, you took some time off and now you're doing this. What's fun about it?
The thing that's
I'm
nice
assuming
about
it's
it,
fun.
Yeah, one, I get to, again, work with friends. I didn't know them freshman year of college, but you know, 2 of them are Berkeley. Many of them I've known for all 3 of them I've known for many years now. Holly was actually one of my fellow admins of that tech group. So I've worked with her for a long time. You know, Kun I've known for a long time, and I'm a huge anime fan. So I use his product more than I use my own product. And so that's one that's really nice. 2, you know, we started this kind of during COVID, so everything is virtual. We have a WhatsApp group to sync up. We do like a stand-up and review like almost every day. But you know, it's all remote, so we can work from home. That's really nice. The other thing is, it's at the intersection of tech and entertainment, which is an area that I also really enjoy. And because we're investing now, we're just constantly seeing tons and tons and tons of companies and talking to founders, and that's really cool. I really like interacting with founders. And I get to see everything that everyone's working on. I can see where things are going. Like I can see what ideas are very common. You know, like a ton of people are like, we're going to make Discord for Web3. We're going to make Steam for Web3. We're going to do social in Web3, you know, blockchain gaming, all that kind of stuff. I can see the trends. Whereas when you're doing your own startup, a lot of times you're so heads down, you don't see anything else but your own startup and maybe your closest competitors. You don't really pay attention to things as a whole. Whereas now that we're on the investor side, we get to see like at a much higher level what's going on.
So seeing at a much higher level, are you seeing openings that you wish you'd see more companies in? Is there something that you think people are missing out on?
Right now, a ton of talent and money is moving into Web3. Like and it remains to be seen if it's the next big wave. You know, in my lifetime, we went through desktop computing, right? And that's when you get companies like Apple and Microsoft. Then you had the internet. That's when you get companies like Amazon and Google. Then the next big one was mobile. I want to say like kind of like Facebook was sort of internet and mobile. But that's like also like Uber, companies like that kind of, you know, DoorDash that spawned out of mobile. Potentially the next big one maybe Web3 or AI, I would say are probably the two that I would guess might be the next one. And every time one of those happens, you end up creating these new giants at every technological wave that shows up. So I think that is potentially the next wave. That's what a lot of VCs and everyone are essentially like betting on, that maybe that's the next big thing. And I can see arguments kind of for and against that.
I don't think anybody would have seen Rotten Tomatoes coming. Maybe, but I mean, you all somehow did. I'm wondering, in the last 5 years, is there anything that you've seen where you've been surprised how it's taken off?
Last 5 years.
2 years before COVID and during COVID.
I mean, the biggest ones are obviously all the Zoom and remote stuff. I think it was moving that direction. It just got accelerated, I don't know, 5-10 years probably.
Yeah.
When COVID hit. I mean, people are using Zoom, but at the time I was like, no, I think companies should be working in person. You can interact more quickly and easily. And a lot of that stuff just was forced to change, where now it's very normal for companies to be even fully remote, not even have an office anymore, or ones that are like a mix. For VCs, they would, investors would typically only invest within their area, like where they could drive to. And now they're much more open, I think, to investing in the whole world, because you could just hop on a Zoom. I mean, for us, it's like, yeah, mornings are Europe, day is US, and nights are Asia. And that was something that I think didn't really happen so much. People like to have much more like in-person, face-to-face stuff. And Zoom is very, very efficient. It used to be 1 hour meetings in person, like on a coffee shop. And if you're lucky, you could maybe put them back to back in the same coffee shop. But if you had any kind of commuting, you'd have to leave, 15 minutes to an hour, sometimes more, to kind of get to the next meeting. Now you can do them literally back to back to back, half an hour, totally fine. I think that's everyone's used to it. And I can just literally wait until they're like in my waiting room. So that's some stuff that I would not, pre-COVID would ever have expected.
Yeah, it is pretty incredible. It's also incredible to be able to pull all sorts of people in. So Simon, so I want to first of all thank you very much for talking us through this. And now we have about 20 minutes that we got to ask, hear from students, if that's all right. Simon, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. If you'd introduce yourself and then ask your question.
Hello, thank you, Patrick, for coming to this talk. So I'm Simon, and I'm studying entrepreneurship, as most of the people listening today. And I'm really passionate about entertainment. So I have a question. How does Rotten Tomatoes plans on fighting against review bombs in which aggressive fans bring down the audience score of a movie without even having seen it, in order to make their favorite material look better in comparison?
Yeah, so I mean, one, I don't run Rotten Tomatoes anymore. We sold it in 2004, but they actually addressed this. I think Fandango owns Rotten Tomatoes now, and they addressed this a couple of years ago, where it was a problem. There were people who were going on and either pushing up a score or pushing down a score. I want to say that they were against a lot of like the more diverse movies. So I think they were going after like female Ghostbusters, Captain Marvel, and I think Black Panther were some of the ones, like more notable ones, that they were review bombing. And so what Fandango did is, they're in the business of selling movie tickets. So then they were able to do it where they now show the score for verified purchases. And that essentially got rid of the ability for people to be posting a review or score without actually having seen a movie. The other thing that Rotten Tomatoes did was they didn't allow people to post up scores and reviews before the movie came out. Because prior to the movie coming out, like at best, you might get a sneak preview like a week before, but the number of people writing reviews and stuff didn't match like the amount of people who could actually see it early. And it's still a problem on like IMDb and stuff like that, where I forgot what it was, but there's some movies that'll come out. I think it was Suicide Squad or something that'll come out and it'll be like near a 10 rating with like 10,000 reviews before the movie comes out and be like, no, you all didn't see the movie, like, or very few of those people. So they've actually addressed some of those issues already at Rotten Tomatoes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Simon. Hunky.
Hi, Patrick. I'm Franklin. Thanks for having me here.
You are Franklin.
Yeah, a few questions. And yeah, I forgot to change my name tag, whatever. So my question is more related to like sort of the street smart stuff you've seen throughout the years, because so like I noticed that California labor laws sometimes are like sort of anti-startup. So you said like you try to, pay yourself and another founder $0, and which is actually disallowed in the recent years in the California labor laws. Like when you see stuff like that, like what do you think as a CEO? Like, would you think just like I would just pay myself $0 and then survive first and then question this stuff later, or worry about this stuff later? Or yeah, just want to hear your thoughts.
I mean, I think especially early on, when you're trying to figure out if something's going to work, or if you're even trying to figure out if you can even survive, the next month or next couple of months, I kind of feel like, you don't need to worry so much about labor laws, of legal, finance, all that stuff. I see people worrying about patents, and I'm like, I don't think, I mean, if you're in biotech or something, yes, I think that can be quite important. But for a lot of startups that are like trying to worry about patents, and I'm like, I don't think that matters, the amount of time and energy and money you're going to be spending trying to do those in most cases, because like, are you really going to be able to defend those patents? Labor laws is like, if we didn't go to zero, we wouldn't be around for them to shut us down anyways. Like, we would have been dead before they even realized that we had an issue. I mean, it was not legal for me to even stay in that office. It was like office space. It wasn't designed for personal.
Yeah.
I looked at it was, I was just combining working very, very late with coming into office very, very early. And if you do that enough, like to an extreme on both sides, then you're just in the office 24/7. And so, yeah, and a lot of times I don't even worry so much about like all the legal finance stuff. Sometimes I think, especially early on when you're trying to find product market fit, if you're just trying to have an idea and get out there, I think just focus on that. Like, do people actually want what you're doing, what you're building? That's the most important part. Like, put it out there. Don't worry. Sometimes people get stuck on all this junk that is not actually related to answering that question of, do people want this? And they worry about like labor laws and legal and finance. Let's set up the company properly. Let's get a great name, and let's make a
That's
cool
what I
logo.
worry about, like sinking too much time into the
I would literally
issue.
put near zero. You can change your name. You can always fix the legal later. You can set up a bank account, all that stuff more properly later. All of that stuff, getting a nice office space, decorating the office. Like, there's so many things you can do that have nothing to do with actually answering a question like, do people want this? That's the most important thing you need to answer. Once you've answered that, then worry about fixing the rest.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. From
Thanks,
wise
Franklin.
words of like 10 years of experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Or 30, but yes.
30,
Actually,
sorry.
I'm gonna, well, he does seem very young. Hold on, Natish, and Tony had a double question. Actually, Abby, do you want to ask Tony's question? Do you see
Yeah,
it?
sounds good. So this is actually, I was wondering this too. Why do you think Sony films such as Morbius and Venom have gotten historically low ratings despite their connection to the Marvel comic universe? That's the first one.
Okay. I don't know specifically like why some get low ratings and others. I don't think having connection to the Marvel universe necessarily guarantees a hit. Like, I would say the second Thor movie I thought was pretty terrible until like Taika Waititi came back and saved it in the third Thor movie. It's actually kind of, it really depends on just, are they making good movies or not? Like Into the Spider-Verse, I think was very, very good. Like extremely highly rated. And I believe that was from Sony. And I think the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, at least the first two, I think were quite good. the Rotten Tomatoes doesn't control the score. It's what the critics say. So a lot of it depends on how the critics think about a movie. One funny story is there were a lot of people who were complaining that Rotten Tomatoes was like against the DC movies. And this is when Warner Brothers owned Rotten Tomatoes, and Warner Brothers also owns DC. And they were literally like, Rotten Tomatoes is biased against DC. And it'd be like, actually, that doesn't make sense because we're owned by the same company. You would imagine if we were going to be biased against anyone, we should be biased against Marvel. And there's even a petition to like, I don't know, like shut down Rotten Tomatoes or something like that, of all these DC fans. But if anything, I would say that proved that Rotten Tomatoes was not biased because it was actually not like giving good scores to the ones that were actually by the same owner.
It looks like Artem has a follow-up question to that.
Sure.
I'll actually let everyone else ask because I just have a kind of different
Okay.
question actually. So
Abby,
Yeah.
you want to ask Tony's second question?
Yeah, so Tony asked, are there any internships or positions available at your company?
Well, Rotten Tomatoes, again, like I said, I don't run that one anymore. For our investment syndicate, we're looking at potentially setting up a fund, and we probably at some point soonish may look at, bring on an associate or something like that, like someone who can kind of help support. We haven't actually formally gone out and written up anything, but it is something we are potentially looking for relatively soon. And in that case, it'd be someone who's very interested in like startups, in investing, all that kind of stuff. And someone that's very organized, is able to help us write like investor memos, things like that, potentially even helping with the first round of filtering of startups, even if they can get trained up to the point where they can actually do a call and help figure out if it's actually an interesting company or not. So it is something that we potentially are looking for, but not quite at the moment, but maybe soon.
Patrick, you've hired a lot of people and had to let people go. What do you tend to ask people when you're looking for somebody to hire? Do you have a go-to question or a series of questions?
A couple. I mean, we only sort of just did what we thought made sense to us. I mean, a lot of folks came from our network, a ton of folks from Berkeley, a ton of folks I knew or friends of friends. So that's one that helped a lot. Two, it was really a lot of folks, maybe not for our mobile gaming company where we had more specialists, but a lot of the other companies, we had generalists who were just smart people who worked hard, who, what we would look for is someone who could actually think things through and be kind of able to act on their own. So be like, hey, here's something, work on this, figure it out. And they could actually figure it out and work it from top to bottom, not someone who would be like coming to us every 5 minutes and like, what's the next step? What should I do next? What should I do next? And ask us to do it for them, because then we don't save any time. And then one thing we did for our design firm, that was when we actually went and we looked for summer internships from Berkeley. We had 100 people apply. We interviewed 30. We actually brought in for the summer internship like 11, and I think hired for real like I think 5 of them or something like that, right? And the one question we had there was, we're like, hey, in our portfolio that we had on our website, which is your favorite project and why? And basically we're testing to see if they even looked at our portfolio. And if they didn't, that was immediate out. It didn't matter how good they were. They weren't showing that they really wanted to work there, because someone who really wanted to work there would have looked at everything we've done, like to decide if this is even a company that makes sense for them. So that was really important for us. And I think we really wanted to hire someone that really wanted to work for us. And I haven't worked corporate, but I always imagine like, and I don't know if this works for corporate, but I feel like, really doing your research, really trying to work whatever context you have to get a good referral, and really showing that you want to work for a company, I feel like it's super important.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly good lesson for everybody. I think you spend so much time thinking what you're going to say, but maybe you should think more about why you're interested in this company and know a little bit about it. Thanks, Abby. Nitish, did you want to come on and ask a question?
Yep. Yeah, so you mentioned that Web3 could potentially be the next wave. I thought that was interesting. Specifically, what do you think Web3 in the entertainment space could do that Web2 currently does not do?
Right. So like one area is around monetization for creators, for example. If you look at like creators, there's like almost like version 1 of generating revenue, version 2, and then what, version 3. Version 1 is them essentially doing ads. Like there's ads in like YouTube videos that they put up and they get a cut of it, or doing sponsored posts. They get paid to go and do a post on Instagram, or mentioning a product on their podcast or on YouTube or whatever. That's like version 1 monetization. Version 2 is getting paid by your fans. So that would be stuff like Twitch, Cameo, Patreon, things like that, right? Substack. But version 3, for example, would be your fans almost like investing in you. So imagine something like Patreon, where every month you're giving money to a creator and you get access to content. Well, what if every month you're buying that monthly NFT from that creator, and that gives you content for that month? But then potentially the creator could do things like, hey, say anyone who holds my last 12 NFTs basically was a subscriber for the last month, essentially. Maybe there's something extra. There's a special meet and greet, or there's some special event, or some, something else that's even higher tier than the typical stuff. Potentially these NFTs can also be resold. So, and so it's not just like a Patreon where you're just giving money, or a Twitch, you're just giving money to the person, to the creator. You could actually be, say, buying the NFT, and the NFT potentially could go up in value, especially if the creator got much, much bigger, and then you could sell it. You could actually, and then would be actually an investment. So that's kind of like one version of Web3 that's interesting. There's other stuff around. I mean, monetization is one. A lot of stuff we're seeing is folks trying to solve, IP, intellectual property. And because it's a much clearer idea of like ownership and all that kind of stuff. And so they're trying to sort that out. There's a lot of different ways that people are trying to attack entertainment through Web3. It remains to be seen how many of these things will work. Tons of startups trying to solve for creators. A lot of startups trying to solve for like music creators. You're already seeing a lot of folks building blockchain gaming companies and monetizing reasonably well through it, although a lot of that is also still a lot of speculation going on in there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. This is a very exciting answer. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It's a kind of incredible that you were so on at, at Singapore time. I guess that maybe that's why. Artem, I know you had a question, and then I was still hoping to squeeze in a lightning round. Artem.
Sure. So Patrick, I wanted to ask you about when you were building Rotten Tomatoes, and how did like dealing with like public perception go in terms of like attacks on, as you said, was DC and things like that, because at a certain point, Rotten Tomatoes started being a huge thing and influencing different spheres of the media industry, right? It became kind of an authority in a way. And how did the company, I guess, deal with that? And was there something that you learned during the process about, like large coverage and like public perceptions and so on?
Right. So for us, I mean, when all the stuff with DC was going on, that was when it was owned by Warner Brothers. So it was well after we had already sold. When we ran it, we focused on 3 things. I mean, besides just trying to survive in the beginning, we focused on like only working on and building things that can improve brand or traffic or revenue, and ideally all of those. So like Certified Fresh, like I said, it helped all 3 of those things. It helped with our brand, because with Certified Fresh, it got out there, people became more aware of it. It actually helped with revenue sometimes when studios would buy more ads with us when it ended up being Certified Fresh. And it definitely helped with traffic as well, because when they're out there and they're buying these ads in other places and promoting the fact that they're certified fresh, more people are becoming aware of Rotten Tomatoes, right? So anything that didn't help at least one of those three things, we didn't focus on. At the time, we did get, some press, in TV and newspapers, stuff like that. But for us, we always focus on just trying to be objective. Like, how do we make what we already do better? We kept a very clear line of separation between ads, the ad side, and editorial, the Rotten Tomatoes score. So we wouldn't, you could never buy something and change a score. Like, there's no way, because that would crush us if that ever happened. We worked with creating, we worked with critics to make a critic submission tool, which I believe is still being used today. So critics could actually come on, they could put in the score, they could choose the quote, they could say if it's fresh or rotten. And by doing that, it saved us time, but it also made us more accurate, right? And we created criteria on what constitutes a professional critic. How many reviews do they have to make a year? Are they part of an official society, critic society? They exist, like LA Film Critics Society and New York Film Critics Society, Online Film Critics Society, for example. So we always tried to do things that could make us more accurate. We later created a user score in addition to the critic score, because it used to only be the critic score. And so we also had a user score, which gives you an alternative view, because critics have a certain, as a whole, have a certain taste. They like more drama, Oscar-winning things, and then users are more just like, they like the summer blockbuster things. Like I'm more of a user taste, and so we try to do things like that to kind of give alternative views on things. So that's the main thing we always did. I don't think we had too much negativity while we were running it, and even afterwards, I would say most of the complaints might be that people disagree with the score, but I think part of it's also that they don't understand that the score is more the way I look at it is, it's the percentage chance that you will like a movie, because it's the percentage of critics that recommend seeing the movie. So if it's 90% and you didn't like the movie, you could still be that 10% that didn't like the movie. I mean, 10% of the critics were saying, don't watch this movie, right? And vice versa. It could be the 10% rating, but you could be that 10% that liked the movie. And I think when you think about it more from a percent chance to like the movie, rather than it's a 9 out of 10 movie, it's really good, versus it's a 1 out of 10 movie. It maybe think about more of your percent chance that you'll like the movie. Then I think the score makes more sense.
Patrick, I'm consistently struck by how customer focused you all were, and I guess it shouldn't be surprising. One thing we didn't show is that I guess 3 years of Macworld, Steve Jobs spent significant time talking about the Rotten Tomatoes site.
Yeah, he actually talked about Rotten Tomatoes in 3 separate keynotes over the years, which was pretty cool. And I had some Apple products, but I wasn't like the person who would watch the keynote live every single time or anything like that. So a lot of times it would be afterwards, people would come to us and they'd be like, hey, did you know Steve Jobs just talked about your Rotten Tomatoes or something? We're like, oh, really? And so it was super cool. From what we heard, he was a big fan. Like, I heard from other folks who knew him that it was his favorite website.
It's just incredible customer focus. Lucy has a question, and I think she's hoping that we'll ask it. But basically, it's interesting because the internet bubble burst. You all were still able to keep things together. You're pretty bootstrapped. I think students now hear about things not being so great also, and I think she's looking to see what parallels you find between then and now in terms of problems or solutions.
Yeah, I think things tend to kind of go in waves, there's ups and there's downs. I mean, we were raising money right as it was like near the peak, and then we immediately dropped very, very sharply. It happened again in 2008. It happened, I would say, similar things kind of happened with COVID, having a huge effect on stuff. And I think during that time, you just need to ride it out. Had we known things would get better, maybe we could have timed our sale a little bit better. We sold before Google went public, for example, and Google was actually interested in buying us, but they approached us after we had signed a no shop, and we tried to be honorable and respect the no shop rather than, you know, secretly talking to Google. And yeah, I've never done the math on like, if we just sold for the same amount to Google for stock, because they weren't public at the time, you know, what that would look like. I think I would be.
Don't do that.
Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And, but as far as lessons go, a couple things I would say that I've learned over the years. One is the importance of focus. I do a talk at Berkeley Skydeck pretty much every batch on this topic. I think if you Google or if you go on YouTube, you can find my talk on focus. It's like 17 minutes, but essentially like don't do too much in the beginning. And it's a problem that entrepreneurs all have. I mentioned this, but basically entrepreneurs, if you're an entrepreneur, you believe you can do anything, but then the problem is you want to do everything. And when you do that, you know, it's not going to work. And so you have to be super crazy focused. Again, think about like Amazon only sold books in the beginning. Facebook only launched in Harvard. You know, Google is only very simple search. And it's on and on. Like every company you could think of, go to the beginning. I'm guessing McDonald's is probably like one guy just experimenting with recipes, I don't know, in his kitchen or something, right? They didn't go out and be like, hey, I'm going to open up 100, you know, stores at once or whatever. And even now, every fast food chain is basically one type of food, right? You think about what kind of restaurant sells, say, Chinese food and pizza and donuts. It's a mom and pop shop, right? The ones that sell one kind are the big ones. And so that's probably my number one lesson. Number two, during the downtime, the one thing you can really control is your cost. It's hard to control revenue, especially when things are really bad, but you can definitely control cost. You can cut salaries, unfortunately cut people if you have to, get rid of your office, anything you can do, that's one thing you can do. And when you want to get to break even, there's two ways. You can increase revenue and you can lower cost, and you kind of try to do both, but the one that's easier to control is your cost. And then the last thing I would say is the advice around networking. One thing we did with Rotten Tomatoes, my co-founders and I, we were all very introverted, very shy. I think I was even especially shy. And I was terrified of public speaking. I would make excuses not to do talks and you know, anything, interviews or anything like that when we were running Rotten Tomatoes, because I was just very nervous of public speaking. I actually had to take acting classes, 2 times of these 2-day intensive acting courses, not to learn how to act, but to get over my fear of public speaking. And it definitely helped. But one thing was, because of that, we didn't network. We were in Emeryville on the East Bay. We weren't in SF, we weren't in Silicon Valley. So we didn't have that like network around the tech people or venture people. And we weren't in LA. So we didn't have the network around movie people. We just dealt with like online marketing at movie studios. And we dealt with, you know, some founder friends, you know, maybe folks we knew from Cal. And that was like it, that was our whole network. And I think not having that network really hurt us when we actually had an opportunity to sell, because we just didn't have enough people to talk to know, to get that advice on, you know, how to sell, should we sell, etc. Also to get connections to folks on who to talk to, who might be able to offer like competitive bids. For example, we reached out to Google, but we only had like a low-level person who didn't write back. And then way later, when we were about to sell, someone much higher reached out to us cold and said, we heard you're selling, we'd love to talk. But by then we signed a no shop. You know, had we had the right contact into Google early, could have made like a massive difference. And that was an issue around networking. And so I think that's super valuable. And really quickly, some tips around networking is, when you have a chance, when you meet some people, reach out, follow up. A lot of people, most people will never follow up. I mean, I'll literally can do right now. Here's a test. You know, there's like 200 of some of you in here. And this is my email address. You can use this email address to add me on LinkedIn. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. If you write to me, I will reply. And even when I do this, maybe 10% of you will do it. I mean, maybe more. Well, you know, who knows, since this is an entrepreneurship class, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do it when I'm literally like, here, it's in your face, still don't do it, right? And the reason why I'll reply to the ones who write to me is because those are the ones who will take it. And those are the ones who will probably be the best entrepreneurs. And the ones that don't take it, you know, maybe think about doing something else. So that's my tips.
I think that is an incredible way to stop. I want to thank you so very, very much. What I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen one more time so that in case you're wondering, Abby has these clever ways for people to go into the code. Today it's tomato with capital T in the middle. Abby, you might want to also put that in the chat just in case, so people will have that. Patrick, this has been phenomenal and so incredibly eye-opening. You have a standing invite. So thrilled that you're at Skydeck, and we'll have lots of feedback for you. But I'm really hoping that those students will start to connect with you on Gmail, Pat Doubt. Actually, why is it Pat Doubt?
Yeah, Pat is from Patrick, and I used to be like a really big No Doubt fan. So I just would add doubt to things. So my name on most social media is Rotten Doubt, Rotten from Rotten Tomatoes, Doubt from No Doubt. Yeah, but I haven't followed as much with No Doubt in a while.
Well, it has been a fresh evening. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
so very, very much. And for the students that are out there, tomato, hopefully I'm saying that the right way, Abigail, as you intended, and in addition, course evaluations are out. As we finish up the evening, I will go ahead and run through some of the speakers that we've had, but it just keeps getting better and better, Patrick. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to give you time back to spend with your family, and as Kyle, if you're still out there, thank you so much for making this connection, and looking forward to spending hopefully more time with you. It'd be fun to have you and Holly and Kuhn and the gentleman who is it Kevin?
Charles?
From Twitch.
Kevin from Twitch. Yeah.
If you all ever want to do that. But in the meantime, have a good night and thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Kyle, for the intro. Thanks, Artem, for the intro today. Thanks, Victoria, and everyone else for all your questions. I had a great time. Feel free to reach out, and yeah, hope to reconnect again soon.
As I say, no doubt.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And also for the class, just a reminder, some of the speakers that we've had this semester, as you're looking at your evaluations, it is a kind of an unspoken theme. Wow, Patrick, you look really young there. That we are beyond yourself. Everybody talking about kind of things that they have done that has been somehow helpful for the greater good. And next week we will be in person with Cal grad Rob Solomon being interviewed by Diane Dwyer, Haas instructor and journalist. Feel free to ask any questions, but more than that, I really hope you all will go on and fill out those course evaluations. As always, Abigail and Rishi, thank you very much for the support. Artem, thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for your questions and your attention. Right to Patrick. I'll stay on for just a little while. What'd y'all think?
I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about Rotten Tomatoes.
Pretty incredible. I can go ahead and stop the recording. There we go.